Hello, everyone. My name is Krista Bombera. I'm a Hungarian journalist, and I welcome you all on behalf of Budapest Pride, the organizer of this discussion. Budapest Pride has been addressing all the various challenges and hardships that the LMBTQ community has been facing in Hungary, be it changes in legislation or shifts in supposedly acceptable public communication, having an effect on views of and interactions with the LGBTQ community. But the specific aim of this discussion tonight is for us to introduce and to get to know some of the Hungarian LGBTQ Christian communities, to engage a Hungarian pastor who has never alienated LGBTQ Christians or those members of the community interested in or interacting with their community. And we would also like to engage a representative of an American LGBTQ Christian community to understand more deeply how they cope with the challenges they face in the US, a country that's not free of Christian fundamentalism and hate speech and hate acts against LGBT people, to say the least. And last but not least, actually, as one of our prime goals, we would like to highlight the fact that persecuting or fearing or alienating LGBTQ people is by far not the only type of Christian attitude that exists around the world. We would like to share positive personal stories, best practices, in other words, inspiration and hope to those Hungarian Christian LGBTQ people whose pursuit to a good life or to liberty and to the pursuit of happiness, as the US Declaration of Independence puts it, is all wished for within the boundaries of the Republic of Hungary. Let me introduce the guests in our discussion in ABC order. It is an honor to have with us Márta Bolba, who is the pastor of the Lutheran Church in Józsefváros, Budapest. Hi, Márta. She was an independent candidate of the local civic community for the 2017 municipal assembly elections at the 8th district in Budapest, as many of you probably know. Many of you may have seen a great documentary of her life too, for life and work by Mária Takács. The title of the film is The Pastor of the Mondák House. I saw it, it's beautiful. Márta's work centers around the social responsibility of the church. Zsófia Handley is here with us. Hi, Zsófi. There you are. Representing Kermel, Christians for Gays, which aims to encourage discussions between gays and Christians. Their goal is to show that the painfully well-known hostile Christian attitude towards gays is not the only option. Alicia Laperche of Q Christian Fellowship. Hi, Alicia. This organization, which was founded in 2003 as the Gay Christian Network, today cultivates radical belonging among LGBTQ plus people and allies through a commitment to growth, community, and relational justice. I'll ask her about that. Alicia grew up in the Christian faith tradition. They would describe their upbringing as denominationally ambiguous. Ákos Modoló. Hi, Ákos. Hello. He's representing Symposium Association. Religion has always played an important role in Ákos's life. Early on, he was a ministrant. Then he joined Symposium LGBTQ Association. He went public as a Christian gay man during the so-called LGBTQ Christian Dialogue Workshop project. And since then, he's been working on building bridges between religious and LGBTQ communities. And last but not least, Daniel Tóth. Hi, Daniel. He's representing Mosaic. Mosaic community is an ecumenical Christian community which is open and welcoming towards LGBTQ people. They organize regular meetups and invite guest speakers, and their members belong to a variety of denominations. Let me do a first round by a very, very personal account of who you are, where you're coming from, what you believe in, what you fight for, and then we would go deeper and wider in our perspective, if that is okay with you. The first round I would do in ABC order again, and then I'd like to break that for various reasons. Márta, Bolba Márta, you are the only guest or discussant who is not a member of the LGBTQ community, but all your life, your faith has led you to work for those who are vulnerable in one way or another. You worked as a pastor, an important inspiration to those holding their Christian faith dear. Marta, what personal experiences do you have with the LGBT community? What led you to strongly believe what you believe today when it comes to faith and the practice of faith and the acknowledgement of faith of the various, very different individuals you've come to know and support?
Hi, everyone. I'm really glad to be here. So, as you know, I am not focused on the LGBTQ dialogue, so I would like to be open to every community in Hungary. So I organize my community as a local church to be possibly the most inclusive. And it means that we want to be also open to sexual minorities as well. But we don't focus on minorities or the vulnerabilities of our lives, but we want to share in a really relational level our spiritual and also relational existence. So we build up our community, like we enjoy ourselves in our gatherings. So with also other kind of groups like immigrants and refugees. So we enjoy the richness of the taste and foods, and we enjoy also being together with different lifestyles and different family styles, or like we want to be open to hear and listen to also the suffering of others. So I see the LGBTQ community that they are often harassed, and I see them as scapegoats, also in Christian communities and also in the broader Hungarian context. And that's why I turned to be more visibly open towards LGBTQ guys in my religious practice as well. So thank you, and I really enjoy this colorful community we are building and living.
Thank you, Marta. Zsófi, let me turn to you now. You worked on a project, for example, extensively that aims to support the development of sensitivity of individuals and groups towards LGBT people through a dialogue with other members of the Christian faith. How did this start for you?
First of all, I'm really, really honored, and I mean it, to be here with some great activists and great people whom I really respect in Hungary, and from overseas, of course. So Kermel is so it's an acronym from keresztények a melegekért, which means Christians for gays in Hungarian, and it started as an act of kindness and showing sympathy to the LGBT plus community by going to Pride, Budapest Pride, who is hosting us today, with some big signs supporting the LGBT community as Christians, and also apologizing for the treatment they get basically for centuries from the church and from different churches and Christian denominations. And this happens every year when we have the fortune to attend Pride in person. And since then, as an organization, we really like to focus on dialogue. Kermel consists of mostly straight allies, who had some important gay or LGBT members of the church in their lives, and they got sensitized to this issue and would like to help. So we try to organize different kinds of events. For example, we also just published a book, translation of a book. So different kinds of means to reach out and to engage.
But Sophie, how did you personally come across?
Oh, me personally.
With the organization, how did you get engaged?
It's I don't think it's anything very, very interesting. I had a friend who was involved for a very brief time, and she involved me, and I stuck around for years.
Stuck around, perfect answer. Alicia. Alicia will be addressed by us in this dialogue by the pronouns they or them or theirs, which is what Alicia prefers, and I try my best to respect that. When Alicia was in middle school, their parents accepted a pastoral call from a Presbyterian church, and it was through their engagement with that congregation that they discerned Alicia's call to ministry at a very young age. As of today, let me quote Alicia now, they continue to follow their call to embody the inclusive love of God revealed in Jesus Christ. What has their experience been that they would consider relevant to our discussion today, Alicia, personally?
I think that being raised in a Christian environment my whole life, but in the States where one term can describe so many different nuances, even within a denomination, it has been a real process of discernment and seeking wisdom of what practices in my spirituality are meaningful to me and do I align with, and also are there spaces that embody those practices that are affirming and welcoming and inclusive. And the answer sometimes is frankly no, which is why I feel so called to developing more of those spaces and also helping those church places and communities of faith that already exist become more open-minded and continue to understand that the love of God really is an expansive welcome of all people.
Has it been evolving or changing, or may I call it even a roller coaster of how you looked at the specific practices that you've been digesting, how to deal with?
Absolutely. I went to college at a private Christian university that's very fundamentalist and evangelical. And I went there because I was eager to be involved in the church and my faith was really important to me. But I tried to come out and had a really negative experience with the oppressive sense of religion and the response I received. And so since then, it's only been about 6 or 7 years since college, and it's definitely been a roller coaster of trying to deeply connect with my identity as a LGBTQ plus person, and also deeply connect with my identity as a person of the Christian faith, because even though I considered changing faiths or leaving the faith because of the difficulty and the oppression that I experienced, it's still something that calls out to me. I think it was partially because I was raised in the faith and partially because I need that sense of hope. And I think it continues to evolve every day as I learn more from my siblings in the LGBTQ plus community, and I learn more about how I experience the love of God in the world.
But has there been a supportive community that fully accepted and embraced and makes them comfortable now?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. I failed to speak about it. And then that is a big missing part of the whole story. It was when I began seminary that I found my first affirming community, my home church that I still attend, even though they're in California and I'm in Texas because of the pandemic. there on Zoom, and also found an affirming community here in Texas now that I've moved here. And it felt like finding QCF was the first step to understanding, or the Q Christian Fellowship where I work was the first step to even understanding that LGBTQ plus Christians existed, and not just ones that were struggling and suffering like I was at the time, but ones who were living their life very authentically and were joyous and very connected to their faith. And so Q Christian Fellowship has been personally, as well as in my profession, a huge aspect of my evolution.
The road and the ways to get there is the point of this discussion, to end it by what you just said. Ákos, let me turn to you. When I introduced you, I told the audience that faith has always been a very important part of your life for a period as a non-closeted gay man of faith, but now already as someone who publicly fights to tell the world that Christian faith and practice of faith and being gay are not incompatible. What was the turning point to you when you came public, and why?
I come from a small town from southern Hungary, and when I was a little kid, we used to go to the Catholic Church every Sunday, and it was such a great community. So even before we start talking about theology and about all these kind of specific topics, I can say that it was such a great community. I have childhood friends from that community, and I had such a positive basic experience about religion, about faith, because I received so much love, so much support, so many great experiences from my Christian friends there.
Ákos, before you go on, just for those who have never belonged to Christian communities, give us just a couple of examples. As a kid, what made that community so great for you?
Yeah, because, you know, I used to live in a small town, and in a small town there are not so many things to do all the time. So we would just meet each other. We would go to the church, go to youth summer camps, or we went to Rome, to the Vatican. But it was all really, it was all very fun. And then after I moved to Budapest, after high school, and I started to be involved with the LGBT activism, and I joined Symposium Association, which is an association which has a special focus on LGBT youth. And we have also a school project which is called Getting to Know LGBT People. And we realized that there are a lot of young LGBT people who come from Christian communities, and they have specific or special difficulties when it comes to coming out, when it comes to being accepted, and so we saw that it's really important to work on that, to strengthen the LGBT Christian people. This was one main part of our project, and we worked together with Carmel, with the Association of Zsófi, and with Mosaic, with the Association of Dani. And the other part of our main goal was that we wanted to start a dialogue with religious communities, because we realized that there are a lot of misconceptions about LGBT people in these religious communities. And we realized that if we talk about our lives as LGBT Christians, then we will bring closer our experiences, our feelings, our emotions, and maybe we can start to have a conversation, and maybe we can start to have a common ground, because our experience was that if we talk only about theology, only about scientific things, then there's a kind of a distance even though it's really important to talk about those topics as well, but we saw that when it comes to sensitization, it's important that we go on a deeper, maybe more human level.
So you presented portraits of Christian gay people to those who've only had more of a theological foundation for feeling strange or alien, and showed how you live, how you work, and engage with them like that.
Yes, exactly, because that was also my personal experience, that my Christian friends in my community, they really loved me, we were really close. So I saw that, but at the same time, they had misconceptions or even prejudices about the LGBT community, but because there was a lack of information in their head, which was not their fault, but maybe they were raised in a certain way. So from one part, it was like, they really love me, but they saw that, okay, but the LGBT community is some strange things. They are some weird people who are like marching on the street, like every summer. So they could not like see how can these two things come together. And then I try to show them with my story, but also with other stories of other LGBT Christian people that yes, we are here, and it's possible to be LGBT and Christian at the same time.
They love you, but you're supposedly different than the rest of the LGBT people. Ákos, what was your most heartening, most successful achievement for you when it comes to misconceptions that you could break? And what do you consider as the most painful failure? If you can point out one on each side of the spectrum.
So maybe I'm gonna start with the failure and then go with the positive experience. So maybe what I see, what can be very hard is that there are some people who can be very radical, and maybe on both sides, not just on the Christian side, but also on the LGBT side.
You'll explain what you mean.
Yeah, I mean that there are some people who have an opinion, but are not open to listen to other kind of opinions or other kind of stories. So they live in a kind of a bubble, and with social media, with all these kind of phenomena, a lot of people live in a conservative or liberal bubble, and they don't hear any other opinion. And it's really hard to break this ice, because there are some people who really don't want to hear anything else, which is like just a little different what they believe. So I think that is something which can be really difficult. And sometimes we have to say, okay, we try to start a dialogue, but sometimes we didn't manage to do that. And but maybe one great experience is that but sometimes we managed to break the ice. For example, so before I came out as a Christian gay man, so a lot of Christian friends of mine didn't know of me being gay, but after that we're starting to have very good conversations about this topic. And it doesn't mean that I convinced them like immediately. Maybe there are still some topics that we disagree on, but I think that what is really important is to start a conversation where we respect each other. Maybe we have some disagreements, but that's completely okay. And one other positive experience is that so maybe there are not too many people in Hungary who who are like publicly out and as gays and Christians at the same time. So I receive a lot of like messages and emails, both in the Symposium Association, but both personally from LGBT Christians or also from straight Christians, and they say that we are really courageous to stand up for this topic because it can be very controversial, especially in Hungary nowadays, where the political scene is not too friendly to the LGBT community.
To say the least. Wanted to engage Daniel as well, because we haven't heard his voice yet, and that's my fault. And just wanted to add to what you just said, Ákos, that there's a motto in my life from Alexander Humboldt, which says, concerning the bubble you talked about, I think it goes like, the most dangerous worldview is of people who never viewed the world. I think that's the best translation of it. It's pretty good from another century. Daniel, can you tell us too what your personal experience, the evolvement of your faith, your engagement with others publicly has been?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me and having Mosaic here. Yeah, so I grew up in a Pentecostal church in Hungary, which is not very common. It's a very small denomination in Hungary, much bigger in the US. And I can relate to what Ákos said about bubbles, because I think the Pentecostal church is kind of a social bubble where you only hear one kind of opinion and shut out everything else. So I come from this kind of background, and actually I grew apart from this even before I came out as gay. So when I grew apart from this community, then I met a choice that I felt from my upbringing. I felt that I had to choose between being gay and Christian, so I had to be one or the other. And actually, the Gay Christian Network, the predecessor of Q Christian Fellowship, helped me a lot. When I researched this on the internet, I found a lot of material on this, and it helped me very slowly come to terms with accepting that I can actually be gay and Christian at the same time. And when I came to this conclusion, I started to search for anything that I can find in Hungary that I can relate to with this. And that's when I found the homepage of Mosaic, and I thought that, okay, I have to try and go there. And I went there. I was very, very nervous. But because I felt that, okay, so now I'm choosing gay instead of Christian, even though I know Mosaic is Christian, but still it felt like I'm betraying my faith by going there.
Wow.
But when I went there, I really felt liberated, because I experienced something that I really felt didn't think that existed, because it was a very different kind of atmosphere where I could freely express my opinion, even if it was not the same as the others, and still felt welcome and accepted.
Daniel, how long did it take you to realize that it's not a betrayal, it's not a choice between being gay or Christian?
Yeah, I can count it in years. So like.
But after you joined this new community, you said you were there with reservations.
That accelerated it a lot. So, but even to join this community, I had to evolve a lot in this sense. And that was now actually 10 years ago. So now I'm very glad that I found Mosaic back then, because it really changed my life and my perspective on how I can go on with being Christian and having both my faith and my sexuality. Yeah, and so that's how it started, and I think that's a good example for what Mosaic is, because I think Mosaic is kind of a refuge, a safe space for people who feel that they can't find the community, what Ákos was talking about, in a Christian setting, and be out at the same time, and living their own self.
Is it a heterogeneous community or more homogeneous when it comes to LGBTQ people?
It is heterogeneous. We come from very, very different backgrounds. Even we have most letters of LGBTQ, not all, but most.
But not only.
And we have some straight people too, actually, and very, very different Christian backgrounds. So a lot of denominations and all walks of life.
I'm really interested in how you do your celebrations, how you do the rituals of the community, if there are such things, but we'll get to that a little later. Wanted to encourage the people with us. There's a lot of people with us to comment, to ask questions of these amazing people that are with us today. We still have some time to go. Let me quote one member of the audience. She says, God is flexible, religion and people who live by religion are not. Engage us, come be part of this conversation. There's another one also, somebody's saying, I'm Hungarian, but I've been living in the UK since 2004. I've met many people from all sorts of religious backgrounds and communities. Many of them struggle to accept themselves. I have a Christian friend who took to drinking because he hates himself for having gay thoughts, and a Muslim friend who has a family and he is too afraid to ever come out. Is religion flexible enough to accept all who wish to follow? Wanted to follow a different path, but now that I quoted the question and I want to encourage members of the audience, let's stick with first with the question. Is religion flexible enough to accept all who wish to follow? Alicia, maybe, I don't know if they feel to answer that.
I think this is a great question. And the first thing I'd like to say is that unfortunately, the experiences this person is describing from the friends and the people they know, it's very common, which is why Q Christian Fellowship has recently partnered with another organization in the US called the Trevor Project. And it's a statement against sexual orientation change efforts and LGBTQ plus conversion therapy, because the messaging that someone should be ashamed for being who they are and that they need to change in order to be morally good or in order to be in good standing in their religion is very harmful. It has, as this person said, for many people, very real impacts on their life. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that first. And then to the question of, is religion flexible enough to accept all who wish to follow? I think that it depends on one's definition of religion. Personally, even in the US, where we have many liberties, I would say that a lot of religious spaces can intentionally posture themselves to not be flexible enough for all who wish to follow. And so that's where I've had to find more spiritual communities rather than ones who claim a particular religious affiliation. And they're Christian spiritual communities, but they're not a particular church, because I think the love of God is certainly flexible and big enough for all who wish to be a part of community, but is religion and are the people who have power over those church communities and religious rights flexible enough? The answer is not always yes, but I think the answer should always be yes.
We have a professional pastor with us, so let me pose the same question to you, Marta. How flexible is religion to accept those who wish to follow?
I was raised and trained as a Lutheran pastor. This is a mainland denomination, and in the US, I think that it has two churches, one northern and one southern, and maybe also this question divided the two parts of this church. So it's a big division among churches, and I think that we should seek for those denominations or communities or local communities who are more non-judgmental or more loving or more open. And I think that in the UK and in other parts of the world, if we realize that it is possible to seek out an open community, we can find it.
Let me turn to Zsófi, because I would like to quote a statement by the organization Christians for Gays, and then let me have the others to reflect on it and engage. According to the statement by the Christians for Gays, the organization does not wish to make a defining statement in the topic of gays and Christianity, but they wish to foster discussions with the mutual respect of each party's opinions and faith. It's nicely put. It's very related to what Marta just said. This is why we are here today, Zsófi. Let us start by what you have found during this work as the most defining opinions of each parties, the foundations of their faith behind those opinions and actions. And also by me asking you, what have you found as the most promising pillars to build bridges, and what you have found as the most challenging to fill in the humongous gaps in thinking and faith and action, and whether you believe that there are some that are never going to be possible to fill in, to find common ground. What a bit similar to what I asked Ákos, but more theoretical. What have you found when trying to organize these discussions with mutual respect of each party's opinions and faith as something that's never going to be done and something that's a gleam of hope?
Okay, so it's a lot of questions. I'd like to start with something positive. So something that we have found during the years through really literally trial and error is personal connections between two or more human beings, but most definitely personal discussions, personal dialogues, and meetings are the best way to get common ground, because something we have been doing and sometimes we still do is kind of discussion, stage discussion nights with, let's say, a pastor who is not affirmative and another theologian, let's say, or between this kind of juxtaposition of the two opinions, and then an audience. And this is something that didn't really make a good effect ever. And something we now definitely prefer are events such as a living library. I don't know if our audience is familiar with this kind of setup, when this is a library when people are the books. So you can borrow someone, so to speak, a book who, for example, I think Ákos is really often a book as a gay Christian. So you can just borrow a great Christian and just open the book and ask your
You gotta explain this in more details to people who don't understand. How do I?
I'm so sorry.
What do you mean by living books?
So a living library is a kind of project when you ask for a lot of people to participate as books. Let's say,
what's the procedure? How much time do you spend together? How much on an individual level do you go out together, or you join a space where you can ask questions, anything? How does it really go?
Okay, so usually it's great to have some big physical space for a book and a borrower to be able to go their way and sit down to have a private discussion. So you arrive to a living library and usually you have a list of books you can borrow. And there's a librarian who can tell you if one book is taken or available. So if you see a divorced mother book, or a gay Christian book, or trans atheist, then you can borrow that book, and that book is going to be a person, and you can just take them and you can go to have a one-to-one, eye-to-eye discussion with that person, and you can ask the actual questions, that your own burning questions, not to sit in an audience and look at and listen to two people discussing some topics. And so this is what, for example, this is a way, I'm sorry, it was weird to explain, but I think many of us are familiar with this kind of setup.
Just wanted to, to have you explain it for those who are not, because it's freaking.
Sure.
But let me turn to Ákos and Dani. Personal engagement has a limit of scope, of scale. How do you move beyond that? Because as Zsófi said, of course, that's what works the most effective. And with this question, let me also just put in one more from a member of the audience. What is the most common question you get from Christian people? Let me ask you both. When we move beyond personal engagement, Dani, and what, as a personal book from a library, is the most common question you get from Christian people on a personal level, of course, but the second part of my question is, how do you go beyond that?
I would start with the first one. It's actually a big debate within Mosaic whether we should go beyond this personal level, because primarily we think that we are a safe space for those who are LGBTQ and Christian and don't find a place where they can be themselves. And that is just very personal. And one part of Mosaic is very eager and keen to also do something beyond that. But we always have to balance this, because it's not easy to be a safe space and be an activist and go public and try to engage other people and start discussions, because you expose yourself and then it's not as safe anymore. So it's always a balance. And so far, Mosaic is more on the personal side of this. We put more emphasis on being there for our guests, and to engage those people who need this safe space.
Fair enough. And what are the questions, or the most common question you get from?
Oh, well, let me think a little bit about that.
Okay.
Maybe Ákos has.
I think Marta had something to add.
Oh, okay. I didn't see. Sorry, Marta. Thanks, Alicia.
Sorry, thank you for my turn again, but I just wanted to add that my first discussion with an LGBTQ pastor was also in this open library gathering in Germany, and she was a Lutheran pastor living with her wife in the parochial setting, so in the local church, leading the church, and I could borrow her and talk to her for half an hour, and that changed my mind at first. So I just wanted to add that this conversation is really a mind changer for me. And after that, I realized, I came back to Hungary, that I was something like people say in this racial dialogue, that I am color blind, that I don't see colors, and it's not so good for racial justice. So I have seen myself as like LGBTQ blind. So it wasn't a big deal for me. But after that, I started to state that I am open, or I acted in a non-judgmental way. And then I realized that how many LGBTQ friends I already had. And I didn't know that they are lesbians or gays. They were just my Christian friends, the community members, a teacher, a friend of mine. I went to the same university class with them. I never knew that they were gays or lesbians. And after that, I realized that I actually do have many friends who are the part of the LGBTQ community. So I think that it depends on how you act, how many LGBTQ guys you know, because then you have them in your life. So sorry, but I wanted to add this, and I really want to emphasize that in my life, these personal connections and these one-on-one talks are really important, and more important to change your mind as maybe official dialogues or really these heated debates. Thank you.
But of course, Marta, their openness to you is a reflection of your openness to them. It's a two-way dance. Ákos?
Yeah, so when it comes to, so you asked about the fact if the personal level is enough after a certain. Well, I think that we have a lot of projects which we have. So we have a lot of different projects which we do personally. For example, as I mentioned, we have a school project together with the Libraries Lesbian Association, which is called Getting to Know LGBT People. And this project is 21 years old. And I am also a facilitator of these lessons, and we go to schools. And it's not a Christian project, but we always bring our personal stories to the lessons when we talk with students. And when I talk about my personal story, I always talk about me being Christian, and there are other facilitators in our group who are Christian, and a lot of times it resonates with a lot of students. On the other hand, I don't think that it's always necessary to meet personally, to be personal, because, for example, we have a video blog which is called Meghívott in Hungarian, Through Gay Eyes in English. And we interviewed a lot of LGBT Christians, because our goal was, as I mentioned, to show these persons' life stories. How did these persons feel in their religious communities? What kind of emotions did they have? How did they feel when they were rejected? How did they feel when something positive happened?
Akos, what's your strategy of spreading these videos, not to have them contained in, to use your word, in a bubble of people who are already interested, who are seeking out that site, who are taking the time and effort to listen and watch?
Well, the good thing is that a lot of time conservative and right-wing media loves to point out to our videos, and
actually, you think that turns to your advantage?
In some cases, yes. Maybe sometimes it can feel a little bit dangerous, a little bit negative, but sometimes it turns to our advantage. And
it does penetrate a different audience.
Yes, exactly. And for example, when I appeared in our video blog as a gay Christian man, I saw it was at the beginning of my coming out publicly. I saw that, okay, this is a gay video blog. Not too many people are going to watch it, so I don't have to worry about who is going to watch it because it's a gay video blog. But then a lot of Christian friends of mine called me and they said, oh, I saw your video. And for example, there is this portal, this Christian right-wing portal, Mandiner in Hungary. That portal shared our videos. So we reached other audiences. And another great help for us was that we found lots of supporters within the Christian community. For example, some priests, especially in the Lutheran Church. And one of our greatest supporters is Rita Perintfalvi. She, probably a lot of you know her. She is a Hungarian theologian, and she teaches at the University of Graz in Austria, but she stands up for women, for the victims of harassment in the church, and also she is a great supporter of the LGBTQ community. And we have worked with her, and we still work with her. And basically, she's an influencer here in Hungary because she talks about a lot of topics which are controversial in Hungarian society. And this is also great help for us.
Alicia, what's their reflection on all that has been said by the Hungarian members of this discussion? Let's take a look at the US, where the struggle is not less, but maybe the community and the methods and the structured arguments and the community work are on a different level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that as Marta shared, that if you're looking for an affirming community, almost always you can find one that's even a little bit local to you. But some of the struggles here is that there are so many rural areas, and that's not necessarily the case as far as finding community, a faith community, or any support at all for LGBTQ plus people. And something we struggle with a lot here, like I mentioned earlier, are conversion therapy or sexual orientation change efforts. And I'm not sure too much about what it's like in Hungary or in Budapest as far as the church or religious Christian environments being the ones that are often supporting those efforts or leading them. They call them ministries very often here because there's so many states that conversion therapy it's not legal. However, the efforts and the methods are the same, just under a different pretense. So that's a huge struggle here, especially for people under the age of 18, for youth and young people whose parents have the autonomy the young person does not. I was really interested in that question about what do we most get asked from Christian people, especially I think it says from cis Christian people, so like cisgender folks.
Right. Thank you for putting that in.
Yeah, and so it's a great question, especially for today being International Trans Day of Visibility, a day that is meant to lift up trans and gender expansive identifying people. A question that I get asked a lot from cisgender Christian people, even if they're LGBT, are questions about, so how did you come to reconcile your faith with this part of yourself? Because so many of the arguments about LGBT Christianity are actually much more LGB focused, as far as what the Bible says about sexual expression or what religious contexts might say is ethically or morally okay. But then there's the question of, well, if you're transgender, does the Bible say anything about that? What does the Bible say about like your God-given identity? And there's a lot of arguments that are equally as toxic as arguments against gay and lesbian and bisexual people using scripture as there are for people who are transgender and gender expansive. So I get asked a lot about what is the case for affirming theology for transgender and gender expansive people, as well as what are the terms, how do I know how to use people's pronouns, the same questions that anyone who knows someone who is trans and gender expansive have, about how do I learn how to use their new name, how do I make sure I'm referring to them right, all of those kinds of questions. And Q Christian Fellowship has a couple of different resources about that on our website that I definitely suggest checking out, especially our guide for allies. Even if you're LGBTQ, if you're looking at understanding someone in a different identity than you, the Allies Guide is a great place to start with lots of definitions and helpful tools. So,
Alicia, thanks for listing the questions, but I am really interested in whether they think that there are definitive answers to those questions. They're still searching for some of the answers to those questions, or sometimes there's a change of mind about what the right answer is, especially when it comes to the Bible.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to scripture, a way that I often explain it is that if we're looking at the book of Genesis, the very beginning of the stories in the Bible, it says that God created the heavens and the earth. God created day and night. And we understand from our experience as humans, there's not only day and night, there's also dawn and dusk and everything in between. Sometimes in the daytime, it's completely dark because the weather is bad and there's a storm. Sometimes at night, the moon is so bright that it feels like it's earlier in the evening than it is. So there's a lot of nuance. So I think that there's definitely strong evidence in scripture and in our faith tradition for there being affirmation through the Bible and through the way that these stories are told for people who are transgender and gender expansive. A whole premise of Christianity is changing from one to another. And that's exactly how someone will experience being a transgender person, is a change or a transition of identity. And similarly, like the questions about how do I address someone with their new pronouns and their new name, a lot of that is a little bit on a person-to-person basis, so the answer can definitely change. But there are best practices, so to speak, or kind of like rules to keep in mind to help as a starting point if someone just has no idea how to enter that conversation, so that it's not the job of the transgender or gender expansive person to explain everything.
Marta, let me turn to you with this same question that Alicia has been explaining to us, and then would like to have some time for conversion therapists as well, because some of you introduced this topic already and we really cannot pass the time without that. But you, as a professional explainer, transmitter of the scriptures, what do you think of what can be found there? How transitional or the premises are, as Alicia said it. And do you see changes in the mainstream attitude by other representatives and leaders of the Christian faith, because of course you are aware that your attitude to the LGBTQ community does not represent the mainstream in the Christian community.
Actually, it represents the mainstream in the mainline churches in the Western Europe or eastern part of the US. So not in Hungary, but if you go one west, so to Austria, there you can bless same-sex couples, or if you are a pastor, you can lead a congregation if you are the part of the LGBTQ community. So
just look at how they reacted right away in Austria to what the Pope had to say.
Yes, so the whole church is divided, and the division is not in a topic, so not LGBTQ rights, but it's how do you interpret the text and the scripture. So it's a more philosophical or hermeneutical question. How do you interpret texts, Bible verses, and other texts of your tradition? And I think that it's more complicated to talk about more the rules of the interpretation. And if you can talk about philosophical topics, or how do you interpret the same scripture, and how you can find out that women allowed to lead a congregation, or just men are allowed to lead the congregation. So you use the same scripture, but you end up in a different decision. And the question is the hermeneutics. And I think that's why you have to study how to interpret a text. And the main rule in my tradition, or should be, is the love of God represented and showed in Christ. And that's the main thing. And you are not allowed to hate and to be aggressive towards or violent towards any group. And you have to accept even your enemy in your cycles, and God is open and loves everyone. So it's the main thing. And if you interpret the Bible according to the law of God and the love of God, you end up in another direction than hatred and exclusion.
Marta, this explanation that you just gave us on how you come differently to consequences when it comes to hermeneutics, has it changed the mind of anyone you know, other leader of the church or representative of the church, or man or woman of a church, a priest, a pastor, a minister, that you've ever come across with?
It is not, I think that if you grew up in a different tradition, when people use other keys of interpretations, like they are really strong fundamentalist background, then you cannot open up a discussion, even not with sciences or with other parts of the world. So not with just other hermeneutics, but they are not dialogical concepts of the scripture, not towards any kind of scientific method. And I think that I have seen changes even in my community, but it happens if someone you love comes or came out. And then you have to decide which way you go with this relationship. And someone I really like, it's an older man. He was really right-wing and raised in a conservative fundamentalist setting. And his son came out as gay. And then he had to decide which way to go. And then he turned towards like other interpretations of the same scripture. And he then had the motivation to seek other explanations.
Alicia,
go ahead.
I was just going to address you, so go ahead. You wanted to.
Yeah, just that hermeneutic of love that Marta is talking about, it's changed my mom's mind, which feels like moving mountains to me, being raised so fundamentalist. And when my mom learned about this hermeneutic, or the way of viewing scripture through the love of God, it has opened her mind a lot. And I would say the same happened for me years ago. I was not affirming. Before I was out, I was a very homophobic person and used the Bible to try to argue that. But it wasn't until I learned to change my perspective on how to read scripture through the lens of love and acceptance that I really changed my mind. So just to your question, and Marta, thank you for the work that you're doing there. I think that you sound like an awesome person.
And I was just going to ask them if they see the questions and the comments of the audience, Alicia, to take a moment and think over one of the questions. There's quite a lot of people showing interest in a question about video that's also explained for those who haven't seen it. The person who is asking it is saying it's slightly off topic, but it seems that other people don't think so. So it's something that we should address. But while you're looking at the question, wanted to turn to Zsófi because I haven't heard her voice for a while, with another one that's very important to address. Let me quote the question. Conversion therapy is trendy here in Hungary too, unfortunately, more and more. There's a popular priest who is for it, and conversion therapy was portrayed in public media a few years ago as something positive. And of course, we know that those who support these in the US or in Europe, many of those organizations define themselves as Christians. In many places, so-called Christian organizations organize or even exercise such things. In other places, such organizations lobby for these so-called therapies not to be legally banned by the state. This has actually been a very flourishing business model in many places, for example, in the US. What do you know of these practices, Zsófi, of the fact that, for example, the conservative British Prime Minister plans to ban these? The conservative British Prime Minister. And I would also like to ask the Hungarian guests, Zsófi, you first, all you know about such therapies in Hungary? Germany and Malta has already banned those. Where can people who would face this choice or be forced to face this choice can turn, who to turn to, how to react in a situation to this? It's again, a lot of questions, bundled into one, Zsófi, but let me hand it over to you.
Sure, thank you. So in Hungary, as a commenter already mentioned, it enjoys a great support from, I'd like to stress that, from very, very, very well-meaning people. And I really mean it. The people...
what supports what you just said, Zsófi? Let me be provocative. What's your supportive experience that it's well-meaning people, mostly or dominantly, like you said? Of course, not everyone.
Yes, so I just think that they see it, if you see it as sin, and if you believe in a God who can move mountains and who can really be there for you and help you with the impossible, and changing your sexual orientation sounds like the impossible, but with God everything is possible. And they see it not just as sin, but they also see the obvious hardship of living with that orientation, and they just really believe that these people need to change in order to be good children of God. And they also believe that God can do this, and they also believe that it's scientifically, especially in the field of psychology, it's they believe it to be proven. And this is something which is a game of statistics, and I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the fact that they they always pull out all these statistics and all these people who successfully they have been converted, they have been changed, but it's really sad that obviously we know how many of them later are they commit suicide, they come out many years after to say that they did not in fact change. So it's really heartbreaking. And in Hungary specifically, I don't think, or I don't know about, but please correct me if I'm wrong, about any institutionalized kind of places, what we can learn and what we can see in the media about in the US, which these live-in care facilities. I don't think we have that, but I have met survivors, Hungarian survivors of especially small evangelical churches. They have these sort of exorcisms, which can be really traumatic and, well, not helpful.
Márta?
I think that it is in close connections towards this closed thinking and towards this closeness to any scientific method. So if you are a fundamentalist and you don't rely on science, or you don't see as an authority the psychology or the other social sciences, then you are somehow blind and you can be violent, and you don't even know it. And
but you also use the term miracle, the miracle of God. Is that a fundamentalist way of seeing things? You don't have to hide behind science, of course, pseudoscience, because it's broken lives that these kind of things result in. But why do you bring up science when it could be called miracle? Of course, pseudo miracle. I'm just being provocative now here.
So I also believe in miracles, and I see miracles if someone is accepted and experiences the true love, and it's a miracle. And you can talk about love in scientific terms, but I think that the true love is more a spiritual term, and also all kind of community life and table fellowship which Christians share. So I do believe in miracles, but my faith is in accordance to scientific method, and I am open and I would like to be transparent. And I see as a problem if a fundamentalist group does exorcism on mental illnesses, and also if they see to have an other sexual orientation as a mental illness, then they do an exorcism, and it's a really violent procedure, and sometimes it leads to mental breakdowns, and it's really dangerous procedure. And if you don't use any contacts and towards the broader community, you can really be blind towards your own actions and act aggressively and violently, even if you don't know it. And I had so disagree with Jofi, so I cannot state those people well-meaning, but I can see them as ignorant, and I see that maybe with you, if you give more information and if you help them with real connections and relationship, they maybe can change. But if someone uses violence against any so people or groups, it's really dangerous, and I cannot see it as a well-meaning or loving act.
Donnie, and then Ákos, and then Alicia, please.
Yeah, I fully agree with Marta. It's, although they think they are well-meaning, but in reality they are ignorant because they don't see how much damage that can cause.
Do not, Donnie.
I'm sorry?
Do not see it. I mean, we have data.
Yeah, I think
the broken lives.
Yeah, I think Marta put it greatly by saying they are blind. They subconsciously refuse to see the evidence in front of their eyes, or the yeah. So it's but I know this mindset because I grew up in this kind of context. So I see how you get there, but I don't agree with it, and I really think it's really harmful. I also think that in Hungary it's not as widespread as in the US as a therapy, or as there are no big institutions doing it. But I think it's a good to say it as trendy, because there is conversation about it, and some people really advocate it as a solution. So yeah, I think that's where we are in Hungary now.
Yes, Ákos.
Yeah, so I have a friend of mine here in Hungary who went through conversion therapy, and he said that so after the conversion therapy was successful, so for 5 years he believed that he was okay, and he believed that he was like straight, but after 5 years it didn't work anymore, and after that he came out as gay. But for him it was a great struggle, and he said that he basically lost 5 years of his life because of the conversion therapy. And he was somebody who he just wanted to have a good life, so he just had good intentions, and that's why he went to the conversion therapist. But I think that I understand that some people have good intentions, but the good intention is not a good excuse, because despite the good intentions, it's a lie to say to somebody that you can change if this person cannot change. It's a lie, and lying is also a sin. And another thing that came to my mind is, I think that especially when a priest or does that conversion therapy, I think that's spiritual abuse to some extent, because the priest says, if your face is good enough, then you can change. But if you cannot change, it's because your face is not good enough. And I think that's spiritual abuse. That's just, and that can be very damaging to the person who is facing this. But fortunately in Hungary, as the other people mentioned, it's not institutionalized. But there are some therapists who offer that. And the bigger problem is that, the Hungarian government and the Hungarian public media is promoting this kind of therapies, and they are organizing conferences with other Russian and American right-wing fundamentalists, and I think that's the problem.
One thing that Budapest Pride and other allies have opened up and made transparent for the wider public is the billions of dollars that are behind these groups and lobbies that Ákos, you just mentioned, the resources, the immense amount of resources that can help them in this cause. And now that I talk of resources, let me turn, Alicia, to you, because you're from the US and you know, and you've experienced this problem more. When it comes to resources, practically, those people who are facing or forced or blackmailed with faith about this conversion therapy, what's the most effective resource that they can use to turn to think over which path they want to take or should take, so they won't feel that years of their lives have been lost or a lot worse?
Yeah. So the first one that comes to mind is a partner of ours that is really well known in the US. It's called the Trevor Project. And they specifically focus on LGBTQ plus people under the age of 18. But they have a lot of legislation that they work on that is anti-conversion therapy. And they have crisis resources for people who need help right now. With QCF, we also have resources that we can connect people to, crisis resources listed on our website. And for people who aren't in crisis but need support and a place to process and be in community, we have several different virtual groups that are open to everyone internationally as well, because they're hosted on Zoom and they meet on a rolling basis. So those groups range from like coming out groups to groups that help you discern about your sexuality and spirituality. And then in the fall, we're going to be having a group that studies the guide that we published with the Trevor Project about conversion therapy and about a biblical case against it. One thing that we do to try to push against the culture of conversion therapy ideas in America is there is this very large influential church that has a program called the Changed Project. And it's all people that have gone through their program and that have given testimony that their sexuality has been changed. So as an advocacy work for us, we have established the Unchanged movement, where LGBTQ plus Christians share their stories as a way of empowering themselves and giving a sense of belonging to other people who have been through similar things, to say that I didn't have to change my sexuality or my gender identity to be loved by God and embraced by Christian community. So I think that our community groups, the crisis resources, and then the inspiration of the Unchanged movement are very concrete resources that can all be found on our website.
Thank you. Wanted to come back to you, but Marta wanted to add something.
I wanted to add that it's really hard to talk about sexuality. So heteronormative or straight people, if you are Christian, so you never talk about sexuality in the church. And I feel like really shaming of this discussion about sexuality that some people, so a minority, is forced every time to talk about the most intimate sphere of the life, the sexual desires and what their body wants or how they can attract to each other or something like that. So they are really intimate topics to discuss in the broader community. So I want to emphasize this, that we would like to, if we want to talk about the intimate relations we have and all our, so the quality of our love life, then straight people also. So I would like to turn the whole topic that it would be so strange if straight people were forced to talk about more their sexuality outside or inside their marriages and how they can relate to each other in this really deep level. So I think that I don't want to emphasize in my local church so much this topic. And even if we talk about, then we talk about it in small groups where a lot of trust is built in, and we can really share our experiences. And you cannot talk about so judgmentally about such intimate questions.
Let me pause there. It was so important what you just said. Thank you. I'm really grateful for it. Ákos, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I also agree with you, Marta, that even when we are talking about straight people, it's difficult to talk about sexuality. But so when it comes to the LGBT community, my feeling is, or my experience is, that a lot of times some people perceive the LGBT community as over-sexualized, that this is all about sex. But for example, some days ago, the Vatican banned same-sex couples of being blessed, and the Austrian Cardinal Schönborn said that let's talk less about sex and let's talk more about love. Let's talk more about companionship, about emotions, because sexuality is not just a sexual act, but it's love, it's family, it's emotion, it's companionship. And maybe what we are trying to do also when we talk about LGBT Christians and our lives, that we can talk also about sexual acts, and that's completely okay. But we want to broaden our discourse and talk about sexuality in a broader way, and maybe that can help the formation of some kind of dialogue.
Zsófi, Dani, would you like to add something to that?
I just wanted to add to the previous topic, just very, very briefly, as I myself came off as ignorant about conversion therapy. Obviously, the fact that someone I see as well-meaning, or someone I see they have good intentions, it's obviously not an excuse, and I don't condone them wrecking someone else's life and under the false, their own impression that they are helping. Of course, it's not an excuse to really traumatize people, to do such huge damage, what they do with conversion therapy. So I just wanted to add that.
Anybody thought that you meant that?
Yes. So of course, by well-meaning, the fact that I see them that they have good intentions, it's more, it just adds to the fact how much it breaks my heart, how much it's what they do, how damaging it is. Yeah. Yes.
Donnie?
I would like to come back to this question from earlier. What questions do we get? Because I still struggle to come up with questions. What?
Right, you take your time to think about that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, why is that? And I realized that most of the Christians don't really want a dialogue, so they don't really have questions. First of all, and then they consider this a taboo, so they don't really dare to ask about how I'm reconciling my faith and my sexuality.
But like Martha said, heterosexuals are never forced to answer questions about that. It's a private matter.
Yeah. So what came to my mind actually is how dare you, as a question, how dare you call yourself a Christian? Because that could be something that I get as a question. I think it's rather a comment than a question, but yeah, that came to my mind.
Another pause on my part. It shocked me, the question you just said. Ákos?
Yeah, I also get this question a lot, but sometimes they ask us, why don't you leave the church if this church doesn't accept you? Why are you a member of a church which is homophobic or transphobic? And or for example, God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Bela, as they say in Hungarian. That is very frequent. Or or they just say that, oh, that's a sin. Don't you know that that's a sin? Or the Bible doesn't accept homosexuality. So yeah, these are the questions that come to my mind, and sometimes we get questions from the LGBTQ community about being Christian. So from the other side, so some LGBT people ask us, being LGBT is not a choice, but being Christian is a choice. But
that's an interesting one.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I always answer that, okay, it depends on the person. Maybe for some Christians is a choice, but for some Christians isn't. For example, I was born and raised in a Christian family. My childhood and teenage memories and experiences are linked to being Christian. So I have a Christian identity, which was not my choice. So I cannot say that, okay, let's throw out all the memories of my first 20 years and let's forget that. I just cannot do that because it's just part of who I am as a person. And I think that's really important to say and to explain.
Wow, Marta, what do you think of that question? One part of your identity is not a choice, the other one is.
I see that hatred is also a choice. So you can be a Christian, and that means that you follow Jesus, who never taught that you must hate any group. And I think that if you choose to follow Jesus, then you choose to accept the love of God and share this love and be part of that miracle. So I think that being Christian is a choice, but it includes your whole self and also your relationships and communities. And then it is not an either or situation.
One of our members of the audience is quoting, "Love the sinner, hate the sin," what Jesus said to the Samaritan woman, "Sin no more," than being LGBT is the same sin as murder or stealing, with a smiley, of course. But wanted to come back, I have a couple of more questions and we're running out of time, to Alicia. I was somehow hoping that you might be the most familiar with pop culture and this video ambiguity. And I'd like to anyone else to chip in to answer the question that seems to interest a lot of people.
Yes, so I think it's a very interesting question. Obviously, there's a lot of controversy right now about the artist's music video and song. I think that it is an expression of his experiences as a gay man who's only recently been out in the past couple of years, growing up in a homophobic culture. And I don't know like the particulars of his own story, but what is art if it's not some sort of protest of the norm and expression of who we are, right? Expression of what we've experienced. And so I can't really speak to like my personal opinion of the content. I just think that it's valid for him to express himself as an artist. And the fact that it's upset a lot of conservative people, it makes sense to me because it feels offensive because it's landing somewhere with them, so to speak. If it didn't seem somewhat true or accurate for what parts of Christianity are so emphasized in conservative Christianity, such as the existential threat of hell, if that weren't so prevalent in their belief system, then I don't think that there would be people finding the video so offensive. But because they believe so strongly that people who are LGBT are likely to be in hell if they don't change their orientation, I think they find it very offensive that the music video portrays an out gay man in what is portrayed as hell with who is portrayed as Satan, right? I think that if it didn't have any relatability to the actual beliefs of conservative fundamentalists, then it wouldn't be raising so much offense from them. So I guess that's my personal opinion on it. But from a larger perspective, I think it's an artistic expression of his own experiences. And many of us, just from speaking about conversion therapies and the attitudes of homophobia, have kind of hit the nail on the head that it is a common experience as an LGBT person to experience that kind of distancing from religion and from community with other people.
Thank you so much. Anybody else would like to comment on the video? I'm grateful for someone who linked it to us in the comment thread. So anybody interested can get familiar with it. Yes, Marta.
I just wanted to quote a comment that Madonna did it already in the 80s. So it's a common expression, and actually the whole church has a lot to do of the whole concept of the sexuality. So is the sexual activity of is a sin? Is it sinful? It is condemned to hell. And I think that if artists provoke that question, we have to answer it with more openness towards our own humanity. Like if you are straight or gay, you have to face that the church cannot talk openly, and openly about human sexuality. And we have a lot of work to do in that field.
There's one more thing I'd like not to forget to ask you before we wrap up pretty soon, because I've taken up so much of your time, and it refers a bit to interest in and support of your organizations, and I'm posing this question to all of you, inside and outside, about the possibilities and challenges for growth of your own community. In short, how much do you find an openness or a need or a quest for LGBTQ people to attend communities of faith like you attend, to practice their religion, not only privately, but as members of specific Christian communities? Maybe Donnie's answer is easy to that because that's the focus of the community. That's how people got gravitated towards that organization. It's not for activism, but to live your faith together. But do you see potential for growth? How much interest do you find inside and outside in it?
I think it is as I mentioned, it's a balance, and we do need to be a bit more visible in order to reach other people who might need us. So we always have to have a balance. I think we are pretty good in terms of recruiting, so to say, new members. There are a few of them every month. And then they relate to us on different levels or with different frequency, but of course it is also important to be more visible, to reach out to people and try to help those who need us and they don't even know that we exist. So it's always that's a challenge that we want to address, that how to be safe for our members and at the same time try to reach out to others and be more visible to them, those who might need us.
Zsófi, how do you find the level of interest in groups of faith for LGBT people?
Well, interest from members, actually the ordinary members, so to speak, of churches, I think it's big. I think we always have support. Sometimes, especially young people. I personally just recently met someone very randomly who was familiar with our work, and it was really flattering. So it's something people hear about us, and we reach people. So that's great on one hand, but on the other hand, on the institutional level, not apart from maybe Lutherans, and it's not uncommon that the only person here is Lutheran now, Marta. So apart from them, churches are very, 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 let's say, hesitant, to put it very mildly, to be publicly even any kind of be associated with us, and with any kind of efforts to be to have a dialogue, to talk about this, because it's taboo. It's something that it's not a question for them. There is nothing to talk about. So unfortunately, it's really hard to approach anyone.
Yeah, so as I said, we have lots of allies, especially in the Hungarian Lutheran Church. So that's a good starting point. And then there are some people from conservative congregations who maybe don't agree with us, but they are open to have for example, a public discussion with us. And I think that that's really, especially Carmel and the Zsófi's association organizes these kind of events. And these events are so great because there are conservative, liberal people, straight people, LGBT people. And when I go to the place, to the event, I just sit down, start drinking something, start a conversation with somebody. And it doesn't matter if this person is straight, gay, Christian, atheist, it doesn't matter. We just randomly meet other people. And I think that these kind of meetings help a lot. At the other side, I think that what we do is, although sometimes it's very hard to start a dialogue with religious communities, as Zsófi said. So sometimes we just spread our message, like we put our message on Facebook, on YouTube, on other platforms, on our webpage. And so we just give a platform to progressive Christianity, because I think that this is a problem that that Christianity is perceived by a lot of people as something which can be only a conservative movement or a conservative community. But there are a lot of people who are Christians but are liberal, left-wing, or progressive thinking people, but they just don't have a platform, especially here in Hungary. And I think that it's really important that we give them a platform, because we are an association which is almost 20 years old. So we have some platforms, we have some resources. Because, for example, I read an article in the New York Times some days ago, and it talked about the fact that in the United States, there is let's say, sign of a new renaissance of progressive Christianity, because Joe Biden is a devout Catholic, but he supports the LGBT community. A lot of members of the Democratic Party are religious people, openly religious people. So it shows that you can be progressive and Christians, not just conservative people can be Christian. In Hungary, it's harder to show this because in Hungary we have like a conservative right-wing status quo with the Hungarian government at the moment. But especially with people like Rita Perint-Falvi, we are trying to give a platform to progressive Christianity as well.
And Marta, let me turn to you.
So what was the question, or we should answer the...
It's something that you
question.
can really answer, to be honest. I just wanted to say, and Marta, as an example of progressive Christianity, a list of what Ákos said, but of course my question referred more to what Alicia can answer from a different perspective from on the US scale, on how much interest you experience or perceive on the part of LGBTQ individuals to join communities of faith. How much do you think there is a need for it? What's the potential for growth or recruitment? Alicia seems to have something to say.
I do. We have an immense amount of interest. It actually blows me away on a regular basis. So we do online small groups, like I mentioned before, and in the past year, we've had over 800 people participating in weekly online small groups spread across about 25 groups, obviously, so that they are actual small groups. But it's just amazing that every single season or start date that we do registration for these groups, we grow more and more, and we're constantly adding more groups and more leaders, because people really, once they find out that Christian community that is LGBT affirming is available to them and it's accessible because it's online, so they can do it from wherever they are in the world or in the US. It travels through word of mouth, as well as more and more people finding our organization through searching for affirming Christian organizations. And so I'm very excited about how many people are involved in the small groups, whether or not they have a formal church home or church that they attend. They're finding affirming Christian community through those weekly small groups that we have amazing volunteers leading, and that we support the hosting through on the internet. And I'm going to ask Christoph, I'm dropping a link in the chat, if you could share that in the comments on Facebook as well, so that if anyone's interested in joining that kind of a small group, I can get your email address and follow up with more information about it, because they're open to everyone. And we do try to keep in mind different international time zones, so it's not just US oriented.
I think it's time to close on that note, because it was very important and informative. Let me close by calling it to your attention that there's a poll conducted by Pride, Budapest Pride, and people answered a question. Let me quote it. As an LGBTQ individual, what would you need from religious communities? Most of the answers were acceptance, support, and love. Acceptance as support, as the Bible teaches us, most of the people who answered said, or also statement of support from leaders of the Christian churches, as Marta is here with us today, or from individuals of the Christian faith, the realization that religion is about acceptance and love, not hate. Those were some of the answers. And let me close by a comment that a member of the audience said, "Amen, let's work on all this." Thanks for the comment, and thanks for all of you for being here tonight. And thanks for the patience for 2 hours. Bye.